The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus told this parable to his disciples. The kingdom of heaven will be like this. It's as if a man going on a journey summoned his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. The one who had received the 5 talents went off at once and traded with them and made 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had the 2 talents made 2 more talents. But the one who had received the 1 talent went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants came to settle his accounts with them. Then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents, saying, Master, you handed over to me 5 talents. See, I have made 5 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy servant. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. And the one with the 2 talents came forward, saying, Master, you handed over to me 2 talents. See, I have made 2 more talents. The master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy servant. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. Then the one who had received the 1 talent also came forward, saying, Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid. And I went and I hid your talent in the ground. Here is what is yours. But the master replied, You wicked, lazy servant. You knew, did I, that I reap where I do not sow and gather where I do not scatter? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and on my return I would have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to the one who has the 10 talents. For all who have will be given more, and those who have an abundance, so they will have an abundance, but those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken from them. As for this worthless servant, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and grinding of teeth. The Gospel inspired by God. In the summer of 1963, I was between junior year and senior year in school, in high school. And I spent the entire summer in a part of Ireland in County Cork called ÓLaoire. It's one of these areas we call in Irish a Gaeltacht. And the Gaeltacht is a part of the country in which Gaelic is still the mother tongue spoken there. And I'd been raised bilingually anyway. All of my education, in fact, up to the end of high school was through Gaelic. I learned everything through Gaelic, including math and geography and history and whatever. But I spent the entire summer gathering proverbs from the old people in the area of ÓLaoire. And I would ask them to tell me some proverb and then explain it to me and tell me the context in which it would be used, and the background to it. And so over that summer, I collected 432 proverbs, which I put in a little booklet and it got printed in the school. But I remember during that period of time, an old man saying to me as I was talking to him and he was giving me some proverbs, he said, if Christianity had never come to Ireland, we could live according to the Proverbs. And he was absolutely right. Because in some senses, stories are the archived wisdom of a culture, and Proverbs are the distillation of those stories. So if you want a really pithy articulation of, a culture's wisdom, go to their Proverbs. Stories first, and then Proverbs later. And the second thing I found out about Proverbs is that they constantly contradict each other. Because no matter what circumstance you find yourself in life, there'll be a course of action which is very important. There'll be another situation in which the very opposite action is what's required. And so in English we say stuff like, look before you leap, but he who hesitates is lost. So in some situations, you have to be really careful how you're proceeding. In other cases, if you delay, everything is lost. In Irish we say, for instance, Níl tin ton mar the hin ton fen. There is no fireside like your own fireside, like home is best. But we also say, Bíonn blas ar chuid an chorsan. There's a special taste to the neighbour's food. So when you're a little child and you go to your neighbour's house, the grub always tastes a lot better than the stuff you're getting at home. And so there'll always be situations in which the exact opposite of what was appropriate in one situation is called for in a second situation. And part of the beauty of Proverbs is that they're ever fresh. You can unpack a proverb at any stage of your life, and it'll be fresh, because the way in which you unpacked it maybe 15 years ago, you unpack it very differently now because you're in a different stage of your life. And so it's like honey. Honey never spoils. They found honey which is 3,000 years old, in Egypt, and you could literally just eat it, with a spoon. So it never spoils. Proverbs are like that. Now, when you use language technically, in science or in philosophy or theology, language spoils when you're using it technically. So often the terminology doesn't mean at all what it meant originally. And so you're saying the opposite of what you intended. And my favorite example is, you take the word transubstantiation, which was defined at the Council of Trent in 1546. And they're talking about what happens during the consecration of the Mass when, you take a piece of bread, and it becomes the body and blood of Jesus. And the word they used was transubstantiation. Now, the problem is, in 1546, substance meant something totally different from what we now mean. So we think that substance is, the physical makeup of something, or the chemical composition of it, and that is not what it meant in 1546. So with the term we now have, we give the impression that at the moment of consecration, the bread, changes its substance. And now if you were to do a chemical analysis of it, you'd find that it's actually flesh, and that there's blood inside in it, and that there's a kidney hidden someplace. And that's not the intention. Substance in 1546 meant the essence of something. And so, transubstantiation meant that the essence of this object changed because of the intentionality and the prayers of the community, that they were having an encounter with Christ. But now it seems to be suggesting, that, the host literally is a living body, and the cup of wine is the blood with the hemoglobin content. So they try to use different words subsequently, like transessentialization and transsignification, but none of them held. And so the reason for using Proverbs is that the language of Proverbs is like honey. It never, ever, ever spoils. You can go back to a proverb hundreds of years after it was created, and you can unpack it freshly, and it'll speak to you where you are in your life right now. And at subsequent stages, you can take the very same parable and come back to it 10 years down the road, and because you're in a different position, you can unpack it differently, and it's still fresh, and it's still addressing you where you are in your life right now. So one of the big kind of movements for me over the years has been to look at many of the parables of Christ, which seem to be addressing our relationship with God, particularly ones like today, that God is the one who gives out the talents, and he comes back and he demands a reckoning, and there's going to be a day of judgment, and some poor guy is going to be sent to hell, and two guys are going to go to heaven. What I've come to realize is that the parables of Christ have very little to do with our relationship with God. They have to do with the relationship between the soul and the ego, between the eternal part of us and our understanding of incarnation and its purposes. So it's not that God is the judge who's throwing us out, it's that there is a reckoning at the end of every incarnation. How well did I live my life? Did I know who I was? Did I understand who my neighbor was? And did I understand what my purpose and what my mission was? And those are like the talents. Paul says it at one stage in his letter to the Romans. He says, the seeking God costs not less than everything. In other words, every facet of our being must be in the employ of our mission. Our physical abilities, our emotional abilities, our intellectual abilities, whatever we have, everything must be in pursuit of the kingdom of heaven. And so I believe that when we incarnate for each lifetime, we come in with two kinds of gifts. And the first kind of gifts are the talents we have, whether it's musical ability, or mathematical ability, or athletic ability, whatever it is. We come with these particular gifts. But these kinds of gifts do not belong to us. We come to give those to society. We're like a mailman with a bag of letters. And so I got a whole bunch of envelopes in my bag. And I think because the bag belongs to me, the envelopes also belong to me. And of course they don't. The envelopes belong to the people whose names are on the envelopes. I've come to deliver these to others. So the talents we come with do not belong to us. They were the equipment that God gave us in order to serve society, and they have to be used in the employ of society. Now, we're entitled to make a living from them, but we're not entitled to make a killing from them. They do not belong to us, these kinds of gifts. There's a second kind of gifts that we come with, and they do belong to us. And these are, I think, for every incarnation, we choose one or two major issues that we're going to have to wrestle with during a lifetime. And these are our gift to ourselves, because these are the guarantee that, we're going to have to stretch and grow and develop and evolve in a lifetime. So it might be like, being born into a very poor family, having to deal with poverty as a child, or it might be given up for adoption as a child, a sense of abandonment, what it is, or an issue with depression, or a health issue. But every single one of us is going to have one or two things that stretch us in our lifetime. And all of these, whether they're the stuff we have in the mailbag or the issues that we're working with, these really are the equipment for incarnation to help us to grow and to stretch. And so the reckoning is not that God is sitting up as a judge with a book of, like some kind of a cosmic CPA, saying you did bad and you did good, and okay, let's have a look and see what was the preponderance. It is the soul and the ego. It's the life review that happens at the end of the lifetime, with no finger waving, no judgment whatsoever. It's just the soul trying to make a sense of the incarnation just ended and figuring out what went well and what didn't go so well, so that the next time round I can try to improve my performance. This is a very interesting question, David, because there are three different versions of this parable in the scriptures, some of them in the Gnostic scriptures. And there's one of them in which the good guy is the guy who got the 1 talent. And the other guys, the two bad guys are the guy who got the 5 and the 3. And there's a totally different shift in it. And it literally has to do with this notion of kind of a capitalist economy, where Christ says, I think Christ is saying tongue-in-cheek, those who have will be given more, and those who have nothing, even what they think they have, will be taken away from them. There was actually a sociological commentary even on his time, like in our time, the 1% or the 0.1%, that people who have more than enough and don't need any more are still grasping and taking everything else. And the people, who have nothing or very, very little, even the little bit they have, their tax is taxed away from or is taken from them. So part of me thinks that Christ is actually saying this with tongue-in-cheek, that there are several levels. There's a spiritual level at which we have to use our gifts, to pursue the kingdom of heaven, and there's a sociological level at which, in actual fact, the people who have more than enough are grasping and taking what the little guys have, and the little guys, even what they think they have and could depend upon, they can't do it anymore. But as I said, there are three different parts of the scriptures. Some of them are Gnostics, and in one version, it's the guy who gets the 1 talent and refuses to trade with it. He's actually the hero of the story in one of the versions. And there's a very interesting comment even in this one. When Christ, according to today's version, when Christ says to the guy with the 1, then why didn't you put it with the bankers? I would have gotten interest at least when I came back. At the time of Christ, it was illegal to charge interest on a loan. So this parable is really messing with people's minds at this stage in this parable today, because it was absolutely illegal, and it was illegal in the Christian churches up beyond the Middle Ages to charge interest on a loan you gave to people. And so here's Christ saying you could at least have put it with the bankers. So you wonder, what is he getting at? He's totally messing with people's minds, as he so often does. He's the ultimate shock jock. He will constantly provoke people into thinking about stuff. He say amazing stuff like, for instance, if your right eye scandalizes you, pluck it out and throw it away from you. Better to enter the kingdom of heaven with 1 eye than to enter Gehenna with 2 eyes. If your right leg scandalizes you, cut it off and throw it away. Better to enter heaven with 1 leg than to enter Gehenna with 2 legs. I mean, if that were true, heaven is populated with blind amputees. That's all you're going to find there. So he's constantly shocking his audience, because the object of the exercise is to get people to think for themselves. And so even in the course of one parable, there are so many different facets to this that are going to blow people's minds and be kind of non-conventional, that only the person who is prepared to be fully awake and go back and think, what does this mean? What are the ramifications? That's the person that's going to figure out for themselves what life is about and what their mission and their purpose is. Yeah.
Wake them out of the trance.
Shake them out of the cultural trance, totally.